So I don't really know where to begin this video. I don't really even know how to start it. I don't really even know what I'm about to dive into, what I'll remember as I'm going through this. But I thought now would be a perfect time to kind of dive into my story, how I got here in the first place, and just, this is just one of these ones where I'm going to surrender everything to God. Just, let my testimony be told, let my story be told, and, we're just going to leave the rest to Him. So, genuinely hope that some of you guys can get something out of this video. Genuinely hope that some of you guys, relate to this. And a lot of you who have came to me, a lot of you who I've been working with have specifically told me that it's my story that you guys relate to the most. So wanted to open the floor up today, really just dive into everything, how I got here, what the journey was like, the ups, the downs, the struggles, the breakthroughs, everything that led me to this very point. So let's go ahead and do it, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a new camera set up, so you can see studio's looking way nicer now, and everything has just been on the up and up. So glory to God for that, guys. We're even going to pour up a little bit of champagne for us this evening, just because, we got to have a toast to more success, more profitability, more profitable students, and just a better relationship overall with God and whatever you're trying to do on that path. So let's make a toast, guys. Appreciate you all genuinely. Been hitting a new PR in our business, so it's just everything is going insanely good. So whenever I get asked about my story, it's kind of hard to tell or pinpoint exactly where to start, but we'll just start in my early life. As a kid, I was just very entrepreneurial. I always had a desire for more. I always had a vision of just, freedom. I felt that a lot of things in life were very restrictive. I'd ask my parents when we go to the store, like, can I buy this toy, or could I buy these Pokemon cards or whatever? And the answer usually was, we're broke. We don't have any money. You can't buy that card because you don't have any money, so how are you going to get the cards? And even things like arguments would always seem to come back to the topic of money. Like, if you want to do things your way and not follow the rules, cool. Get out from under our roof, go make some money, go feed yourself, etc., etc. So throughout my early childhood years and just, as a kid, I always came to the conclusion that whatever desire I had that wasn't being met, the barrier to that is usually money. So of course, like all curious kids, I just started to ask, how do I make some money? And the answers that I would get were not answers that I like at all, because basically everybody was telling me, go to school, get a job, make money. That's how you make money. But I was like, okay, cool. Let me go ahead and get a job. And the answer was, you're not old enough yet. You gotta be 16 to have a job. Keep in mind, I was around 10 or 11 when I started to ask this question. So it became very clear to me early on that money was what was keeping me from the freedom that I wanted, from the things that I wanted, and from really living a life on my own terms. So I became very curious, because I was like, how is that actually true? How is it true that I need to wait till I'm 16 to make money? My grandma gave me money for doing some chores the other day, so if she's able to give me money, maybe I could go do other people's chores for money, or maybe I could ring on their doorbell and see if I could do their chores for money. All of these ideas started popping up in my mind. So I got very creative. I started really putting myself out there, really asking, if I could walk the neighbor's dog. I would set up lemonade stands. I would go to school with a pack of gum and try to sell it stick by stick. Like, I was one of those kids where the industriousness and just entrepreneurial spirit was just in me very early. And again, I can't explain why this was the case. I was just very curious. I just really wanted those motherfucking toys. I just really wanted those fucking toys, and I was just gonna do anything it took to go ahead and get those toys. So that was basically the initial spark that got me curious. Fast forward maybe a couple years, I was probably like 12, 13 at the time. I had this babysitter, and she was probably in her mid-20s, probably around my age right now, back when I was 13. And whenever my parents were gone, she'd just come by, she'd watch us. Usually it was just on her computer, doing homework, whatever. And one day she was showing me YouTube. And this was my first kind of connection with social media and the internet, and she was basically showing me how you can look anything up on this website and it will show you a video. Music videos, like I remember there were a couple of artists I like at the time, and you could get their music videos for free on YouTube where you had to pay for it on the iTunes store. And then I even remember on YouTube you could look up how to tie a tie or how to tie your shoes or how to install drywall and all of this stuff. So very quickly, I got an idea. I was like, you know what? I can ask this thing how to make money. How do I get a job? I can ask this thing anything. And that's exactly what I did. So I waited for the next opportunity where nobody was home and they left the computer unattended. I went to the computer and I started looking up everything. How do I make money as a 12-year-old? How do I make money when I'm not old enough to get a job? How do I make money on YouTube? How do I make money online? I was looking up all of this stuff because I knew I was not old enough to get a job, but somehow, some way, there had to be a way for me to go ahead and make some money. So after thorough research, I probably did about 2-3 hours of research, I came to the conclusion that there were a few ways for me to make money. One of which was called Swagbucks. And I remember Swagbucks, shout out Swagbucks. If you ever heard of Swagbucks before, you could literally go on there and they would have these surveys. You'd have to fill out all these questionnaires and put your email and answer all these questions. It was basically like 20 to 100 questions per survey. But they would pay you to do these surveys and they give you rewards points. So you got what's called as Swagbucks. And basically you could take the Swagbucks and exchange them for PayPal cash, for Visa gift cards. You could exchange them directly for money. So I would sit there 24/7. When I got back from school, I would hop on their computer and I would just do these surveys for hours. I would fill out thousands of questions. And of course, you only got paid like $1 or $2 per survey. Some of them would pay you $10 or $5. But guys, this was freaking tedious work. You had to sit there all freaking day just to make a good $10 off of answering these surveys. But I grinded it out. This was the only vehicle I had to make money at this age. So I grinded that shit out. By the end of the summer, I had $100 worth of Swagbucks, and I went and bought whatever the fuck I wanted. I went and bought Pokemon cards. I went and bought, action figures, whatever it was at the time that I was interested in. As soon as I got that Swagbucks payout, I just bought everything that I wanted. And while it wasn't that much money in the grand scheme of things, when you're 13 years old, you just made $100 sitting on a laptop, you're not necessarily complaining. So that was probably the first time where I realized, okay, there is something else out there. It might not be something that could pay all my bills, but there are ways for me to go ahead and get a little bit of money. And that was pretty much the genesis of this whole journey in the first place. So fast forward a couple years, life happens, things happen, school, sports, work, all of this stuff. And I'm around 16 years old. And of course, ever since the Swagbucks era, I've continuously been exploring ways to make money on the internet. Me and my one friend used to do parkour, so we had a parkour channel. We had an action scene channel where we'd film fight scenes like Jackie Chan style, and we'd do our own stunts and all of this stuff. And we just had a lot of different things that we were experimenting with to go ahead and make money, use social media, and basically everything that is so prevalent in the modern day now. But back then, everything was new. The biggest YouTuber online was probably Ryan Higa, Smosh, those OG YouTubers that really pioneered the space. So in a way, we were very, very early to what would become the platforms that everybody uses today. But long story short, we ended up growing a few channels, nothing more than a couple hundred subscribers. People at our high school would watch the videos, but it was never anything super serious. So by the time I was 16, I actually started getting interested in another business vehicle, which would be penny stock trading. So penny stock trading, if you guys remember the dude Tim Sykes, I think he's still around to this day, but back in the day he had a penny stock course where he basically told his story of how he took some of his money that he got for his birthday and turned it into like $1.2 million trading stocks. Now, this was my first exposure to anything related to the stock market. I had never even heard of the stock market before. I had never heard of penny stocks, but I was intrigued by the idea of being able to invest a little bit of money, and what seemed like just a couple clicks of a button, you could turn a very low amount of money into a big amount of wealth. And unlike all the other stuff I was doing, you could do so with only a couple clicks of a button, and you didn't have to talk to anybody, you didn't have to hire employees. So I literally thought that this shit was a fucking scam. So I went to my uncle, my dad, my mom, everybody that I went to, and I was just like, basically, is this shit real? Like, can you actually make money from the market? And it was real. The stock market was a real thing. You could invest in it, but the only thing they said, it was extremely risky, and it was basically gambling. So I went back on the internet, the same place that was giving me all my information back then, and I found my way back to Tim Sykes' content, and I actually came across his course. Now, at the time, I didn't really have enough money to buy the full course. I think the full course was like $500 or something, and I only had about $300 from all the swag books I saved up, from like 5 birthdays of my grandma giving me money. I had a couple $100s to play around with, but I didn't have the full investment fee to go ahead and get Tim Sykes' course. So what did I do? I looked it up. I looked it up again. How can I get Tim Sykes' course for free? How can I get Tim Sykes' course for half the price? And I found somebody on eBay who had bought the DVDs. Now, keep in mind, back then there was no School, there was no WAP, Fanbasis, there was no Kajabi. This shit was coming in fucking DVD format inside of the real mailbox. So there was somebody on eBay who had bought the course, but was now selling it for about $100. So immediately I fucking go ahead and buy that shit, comes to my door in like 2 weeks, and I get started on penny stocks. And I think I may still even have the journal, or have photos of the journal where I took those notes. If I do, I'll go ahead and pop them up on the screen. But this was 16-year-old me buying my first course through the mail, DVD style, and it was the Tim Sykes penny stock course. Now, using that course, I actually turned my couple $100s into a couple $1,000s. The only thing was I didn't know risk management. None of these concepts were really explained in that course, and if they did, I wasn't really listening, because very quickly that couple $1,000s I made went straight back to zero, and I found myself back in the poorhouse again. And at that point, I really didn't know where to go from there. I kind of just put trading down and kind of chalked it up as this is only something that rich people can do if you have a bunch of money. So at that point, all the way up until my later life, I never really looked at trading again. So basically from that point at 16 years old to probably my early 20s, I never really looked at trading ever again. However, the desire and the drive to do my own thing, to be an entrepreneur, to not have to take the quote-unquote normal route was still very much inside of me, so I wasn't giving up on that. I just didn't know exactly what my vehicle was at this point. The swag books was cool when I was like 13, 14 years old, but growing up, I was going to start driving soon. I would be soon going off to college maybe. I realized very quickly that this couple $100s every month, every couple weeks, wasn't going to cut it for my adult life. And although I had made a couple thousand in the stock market, I lost it just as fast. So I was really looking for a way to make consistent income during this time. And that's when I got into the world of website development. See, I had this other friend. He was very business savvy. He was in the video games. Me and him would play video games a lot. And we had a lot of mutual friends as well. And it turns out that he was already developing websites and charging businesses a fee for these websites. Shout out Nick. He's also the dude who let me stay on his couch and sleep in his garage, sleep on his floor. He basically prevented me from dying homeless at the age of 17. So brother, forever indebted if you're seeing this. But Nick was also a very entrepreneurial kid. We were around the same age at the time, and after spending a couple months with Nick, hanging out with him, seeing what he was doing for his clients, we basically both could code websites. And at that point, I was more good at the selling of the websites, finding the clients, and he was better on the fulfillment side. So we partnered up. We're like, okay, we'll do a 50-50 split. Whenever we get a client, I'll close them and I'll manage the client relationship, and you just make sure the services are fulfilled on. And very quickly, we started to get a bunch of clients. So we're making like $1,000 to $2,000 a website. We're getting maybe 3 or 4 clients a month, and to a couple of high schoolers making that much money without ever having to step into a job just did really 2 things. One, which was very good, it broke our belief barrier. It allowed us to, we saw the potential in what we were doing. We were making a decent amount of money now for a couple of high schoolers, and we were able to enjoy ourselves and not be a burden on our parents. But at the same time, when you're making money and you're doing it in your own way and you're also very young, it can lead to overconfidence, can lead to a lot of ego. And that's what ended up happening to me during this time. I just got a little bit too full of myself, and that was probably why I was tuning out all the advice I was getting at that time. And at the age of 16, I was basically done listening to people. I was like, fuck all this shit, fuck school, fuck my parents, fuck sports. I was just like, I'm going all in with this business stuff. I'm moving out and I'm going to do my own thing. Fuck college, fuck playing sports in college. All we're going to do is focus on making money, and I'm going to move out by the time I'm 18. And of course, living in a household where you have Asian parents, that's not necessarily going to fucking fly. And as soon as I revealed this new plan to my parents, they very quickly shut it down and said, absolutely the fuck not. That is the last thing that is going to happen. You're going to go to school, you're going to finish high school with straight A's, you're going to go to college, you're going to get a job, and you're going to take the route that we want you to take, or you're going to get the fuck out of my house. And of course, me being me at that time, I didn't really like that. And I'll even go further to say that I did everything that I could in my power to not have that happen. So at that point, I was still a little ways from college. I was probably about to turn 17. But at the same time, knowing where they stood with this, I knew that I had to make something happen. Otherwise, I was basically going to be on my own. And I already knew that I for sure did not want to go to college. So basically, a new flame was kind of lit up under me. And I was like, basically, how can I make this work before I, have to go off to school, have to go get a job? I need to make something work right now. And that's basically what I did. I set out on a mission to try every single business possible to see if I could make money before I was the age of 18. And I tried everything. I tried a clothing business, drop shipping. We continued to do the websites, which was bringing in good money, but not the type of money that I was looking for. So I kept going. I kept seeking, kept trying out different stuff. Got into photography too and started freelancing, filming videos, photo shoots. So I was making a little bit of money off of that as well, along with the websites. And pretty soon we turned our little website agency into a full creative agency. So we were doing people's social media content. We would post to your social media. We would film your campaign. We'd even help with designs if you were launching a clothing brand. And of course, our staple service was doing a website. So we started doing pretty good. Everything was on the up and up, but very quickly something changed. Still feels kind of crazy, and I won't really go into too much as it relates to the story, just simply for the privacy of the people involved. But basically, my business partner, Nick, at the time, was dealing with some very serious family issues. And for personal reasons, he had to step away from a lot of the business that we were doing. And honestly, it really sucked, because if we would have kept that business going and everything would have stayed the way it was, honestly, I might have even had my takeoff. I might have even had my breakthrough very early on in my life, maybe even right after high school or right into college. But it just goes to show that God's plan is perfect and God's timing is perfect timing. And looking back at it now, if I would have made it back then, if I would have got on back then, it would have probably ended very terribly. My ego wouldn't have been able to handle it. Probably would have ran through all of the money. So it's actually a blessing in disguise that this happened. However, the things to follow it would not necessarily be the most comfortable situations. So fast forward, we're 17 now, about to go off to college next year, and Nick's still dealing with his family situation. I'm dealing now with the family situation at home, and the business itself, we've kind of become distracted from. I'm still running a couple social media accounts. I'm doing a little bit of modeling on the side now. Nick's still managing a few of his old websites, but for the most part, we're being weighed down by personal circumstances. For him, there were some legal issues. Like I said, I won't go into too much. And for me personally, it was just the fact that there was now an ever-increasing pressure from my parents of what school am I going to? What applications am I filling out? When am I taking my SATs? what are my current grades so we can start applying for colleges. All of this stuff that I was basically trying to outrun and not have to deal with was now looming over my head, and reality was finally setting in. Now, at this time, I really didn't have anything else going for me. I had a pretty big Instagram account that I was making a couple $100s a month off of. We get the odd website gig or photography gig every now and then, and I had about, $5,000 to $10,000 saved from all of my years of just saving up and doing these services. But of course, even though I had some momentum, even though my parents knew that I had stuff going on that could potentially turn into a career, from their perspective, growing up with very traditional parents and just the culture in general, it wasn't an acceptable route. And, out of them trying to protect me, they basically gave me an ultimatum. I either take the route they want me to take, apply for schools, go to college, while I'm in college, maybe try to get my business off the ground in the meantime, or I could go my own route, keep doing what I'm doing, not go to school, and basically they cut me off, no financial support, but I get to do my own thing. And of course, most 17-year-olds at the time, keep in mind high school wasn't even over yet, would have obviously bent the knee, just did what their parents wanted them to do, and take that route, try to make them proud, try to do what you're supposed to do, quote unquote, live the life that they want you to live versus live the life and live the vision that God is speaking to you and putting inside your heart, putting inside your soul. And back then, I didn't even know God. I didn't even worship anything. I didn't grow up religious. I grew up around some religion, but I never really knew what the whole church was about, what God was about, and even, what the Bible even was. But ever since the beginning, I always felt this pull. I always felt this need to do something greater with my life, to not follow the beaten path, and I always felt this pull for freedom, pull to inspire people, pull to basically bring my gifts to the world in a way that didn't have to fit within someone else's mold or someone else's construct. And up until then, the way I even got to that point was trusting that feeling, was trusting that call that seemed to be within me since birth. And it was at this very moment in my life that I had to decide, are you going to trust what the outside world's telling you, what your parents are telling you, what society's telling you, what your teachers and counselors are telling you, or are you going to trust this pull, this feeling, this calling that you felt inside of you since the beginning of time? And I don't know why, it went against all logic, but for whatever reason, I knew. I didn't think, I didn't feel, I knew what decision I had to make. I packed up my shit and I got the fuck out. And at the time, I knew this was going to do some damage between the relationship of my parents and I. But I also knew and trusted the fact that in order to make them proud in the long run, in order to not resent them and go their way and then realize at the end of it that I took the wrong way and I resent them and they just can't understand why. And, I basically seen this pattern play out enough in some of my cousins, some of my friends. So I was like, I am more okay disappointing them now to make them proud later and for us to both understand each other than I am keeping them appeased for now, and then for the rest of our lives, there's just a divide because we never got to hash out what we both weren't saying. So to me, the decision was clear. I left, I respected their decision, they respected mine. Fast forward till now, we are best friends. Like, my parents are literally the chillest fucking people ever now. And they used to be the opposite of the chillest people ever, but it just goes to show, if you stand on business, if you make it happen, instead of running your mouth and telling people it's going to happen, they will believe you and everybody will eventually come back around. You see, nobody owes you blind faith, you guys. A lot of you guys think just because your parents are your parents, they owe you some sort of blind faith when you haven't fucking accomplished anything. You are not God. God is the only one who gets blind faith. Me, you, your parents, your sister, your brother, nobody else gets blind faith. We all have to work. We all have to produce results for people to believe us. So back then, I was bitter about it, right? I held that against them. I wanted to, quote unquote, prove them wrong. I wanted to stick it to them and have them finally admit that they saw it the wrong way and I saw it the right way and in your face and all this immature stuff. But now in hindsight, I realize that it was just necessary. I had to grow, They had to grow. We're both just people figuring it out. They were imparting the best advice that they knew at the time, and I was handling the situation the only way I knew at the time was just to follow that calling that God put inside of me, guys. Understand, as soon as I left, I also dropped out of high school. I stopped going to school completely. I was living on Nick's couch. As soon as I walked out, I walked to Nick's, and that was where I stayed for the rest of that summer. I was sleeping on his couch, and because of what was going on with him and his family, him and his mom had to rent out their townhome on Airbnb. So I was also staying there with 3 to 4 other random guests at a time while I was sleeping on this couch. And of course, a lot of my stuff got stolen. Of course, it was kind of sketchy because I didn't really know who these people were. There wasn't a door anywhere protecting me from anything. So I was basically just a kid on the couch. I was known in my hometown as the high school dropout who's smoking weed, staying on Nick's couch. And to my family, I was also the high school dropout who probably couldn't even get a job at McDonald's. And basically everybody around me, every voice, everything that I was hearing, all was just negative. How I was going to be a failure, how I was never going to make it. My counselor said, "You're making the wrong choice." Every voice around me was saying no, but the funny part was, while I was sleeping on that couch, while both me and Nick were going through it, it was the most alive I've ever felt, even to this very day. Even to this day, with all the money, with all the freedom, with material shit, girls, whatever it is, vacations, even till this day, I have never felt a rush. I've never felt a deeper calling. I've never felt more purpose-driven than in those moments where I was sleeping on Nick's couch, 17 years old, high school dropout, the whole world telling me no, but this calling inside of me was speaking so strong that it drowned out every other voice. Like I couldn't even hear it, couldn't even see it. I was so convicted when there was no proof, no credentials, no result behind it whatsoever. For some reason inside, I was so convicted in this calling and in this path. And to this day, guys, I still feel it to this day. And my only explanation for it is God. It can only be God. So that is also how I started to grow deeper in my faith, is the more I trusted this feeling, the more I trusted this calling, the better my life seemed to get, and the more convicted, the more alignment I'd have, the more I just meet random people along the way who put me onto this thing here. They maybe gave me a client or gave me an opportunity that I didn't have before, but somehow, some way, the more I just put one foot in front of the other, walking in faith, everything would always line up. Not on my timing, but on God's timing. But on to the next chapter. So basically, that happens. I'm on my own. Nick is basically on his own too, and we're both just trying to figure it out. And at the time, he's considering moving back to Chile. At the time, I'm considering moving to LA. I have some family there, I have some friends there, and I also ended up applying for a fashion school, which wasn't a real university because obviously I'm a fucking high school dropout, but it was a trade school. And I ended up qualifying to actually get into this trade school, and I was able to use that to get out to LA. Now, shortly after I got out there, obviously, I did not have much money in the first place. I saw what my student loan I was going to have to pay back on the back end. So very quickly, I got in, I networked, met a bunch of cool people, met some people I still work with to this day, but very quickly after that, I also decided to drop out. And this is another moral of the story, because school, when you really think about it, the only benefit to it is networking, guys. So what did I do? I got into the school, I networked, I made the connections, then I fucking dipped. And with those connections, I was able to meet my first mentor. I was able to meet my first business partner. And then from there, I basically decided to launch my clothing line again. So I launched another clothing line, pretty much broke even, did a bunch of other stuff in LA, started a social media agency, started a software company. I had all these little business plays that were making me some money here, some money there, but nothing was really taking off like I wanted it to. And that's when COVID rolled around. So when COVID happened, LA got crazy, there were riots, people were setting shit on fire, they're making you wear a mask everywhere, and basically a whole bunch of fucking bullshit. So at that time, my industry, the entertainment industry, was basically not doing anything. There were no photo shoots, there were no modeling gigs, there wasn't anything going on because everybody was social distancing. So I was essentially out of work once again. The bills were piling up. I was almost getting evicted of my LA apartment. I started renting it out on Airbnb just to cover the rent. But after COVID, all that got fucked up too. They changed the laws. So basically every shot, every play I was throwing up, everything I was building up all into that point across a 4-year period was shattered in an instant. And during COVID as well, I started doing more research on other business models, and I actually came across real estate wholesaling. And this is also, I didn't know at the time, but this would be the first time I get reintroduced to day trading. So COVID's happening, craziness all over, basically out of work, and I have to look for other avenues to make money. I have a little bit of savings. I'm also driving a little bit of Lyft and Uber at the time, and I come across this thing called real estate wholesaling. And basically the idea of it is that you take a property that's distressed or a property somebody really wants to sell, call them up, put it under contract, and then you flip that property to a fix and flip investor, and you keep the difference. So basically, if you find a property, it's worth $50,000. After repairs, they can sell it for $100,000. So you get it under contract for $40,000, sell it to the investor for $50,000, and you keep the 10 grand split, or whatever it ends up being, right? So that piqued my interest at the time, because I was like, okay, I could do it virtually, I could call people up, put things under contract, and I could still make money without even seeing the property. So I do a little bit of research, start making some calls, and I come across what will be my new mentor. And it's this dude named Rafael Vargas. He came up in the wholesaling industry, pivoted to some other stuff, but he was running a group at the time where he was teaching basically every business he was involved in. So he had a section in there where he's teaching real estate wholesaling. He had a section in there where he was teaching Amazon FBA, and then he had a section in there where he was teaching Forex trading. I personally joined for the real estate wholesaling content, and that's pretty much what I did. I was just focused on real estate wholesaling the whole time that I was in there, but the wins from some of these trading accounts and the people who were taking the trading course was definitely intriguing me. But because of my past experience with trading back when I was 16 years old, I still had that belief ingrained in me that you had to be rich in order to day trade. So I was like, yeah, most of these people are probably already starting with 100 grand, or most of them already made money in wholesaling, so now they were using it for trading. But one day I thought, what the heck? Let me just dive onto one of their webinars. Let's see what they're talking about. Let's see if this is even something that's possible for me in the near-term future. And I sat on that live stream, and I actually ended up learning quite a bit. I learned about the concept of risk management and how trading was more of a probabilities game, how you had to win and you had to lose. But as long as your wins were bigger than your losses, you could make a profit. I also learned about stop losses, which was something I never knew about before when I was spot trading. And I also learned about this thing called prop firms. And this was my first introduction to prop firms. And it was explaining to me how you could pay a little bit of a fee. You could qualify for this account. If you trade well enough, they'll give you capital and you could split the profits with the firm. And of course, at the time, I thought this was a total scam. I was like, there's no way someone's giving you $100,000 or $50,000 or however much money it is to just go ahead and trade and you'll split it later. But this was my first introduction into the actual world of prop firm trading, and my belief system started to change. So I thought, okay, well, if all I need is a couple $100s to start this, maybe I'll go ahead and start the process of learning this. By the time I make some money in real estate wholesaling, I could use that money to pay for some prop firms and to go ahead and get that started. And that's exactly what I did. I got a job wholesaling for this one company. I was getting paid commission. It was pretty good pay, keeping my expenses low. And that whole year, I was just learning how to trade. I was buying courses on how to trade. I would attend the live streams on how to trade. I was going on babypips.com, learning about the Forex market. And about a year and a half into learning, I started my first prop firm account. And back in the day, it was called My Funded Forex. So My Funded Forex was the first prop firm I ever tried. I loaded up a 100K account. I took 2 trades on there and I won both of the trades, which was absolutely terrible. And you're probably wondering, like, why was that terrible? You won your first 2 trades, you used your strategy, what's the problem here? It wasn't terrible because I won the trades. It was terrible because right after I took those 2 trades, I had thought that I had found the Holy Grail. I thought that I can't be touched. I was the greatest trader ever. It has to work now. This is the easiest money I ever made. And the very next day, I ended up quitting my job, which in hindsight was one of the stupidest decisions I could have fucking made. I only had about 3 months of savings at the time. I didn't even know how to trade a proper strategy, and this beginner's luck was not even in a funded, it was in an eval. But me being me, I decided to jump the gun. I decided that I was the best trader ever after 2 demo trades, quit my job, and went right into prop firm trading. I loaded up 3 more accounts on the 100K, and I blew every single fucking one of them. And by 2 days after that, I had no fucking clue what I was going to do. Now, there are 2 ways to look at this situation. On one hand, you could look at it as, oh, we're fucked. We should go crawl back. We should go get our job back. We should go do this, or that. We made the wrong decision, and go in the corner and cry about it. But I knew from experience that this was definitely not what I needed to do. At the time, I had 3 months of savings, which was not very long. I also had a couple credit cards, but in the background, I was also building up my credit profile. So I was getting all kinds of stuff, trade lines, I was getting secured credit cards, I was getting the Chase Sapphire and paying that off early, so my credit was really, really good. I also had an LLC attached to an address that was building up credit as well. So basically what I did was I took out a shit ton more credit cards. Some were 0% interest business cards, some were low percent interest rewards cards, but I took out in total about $80,000 in credit cards. And this was my plan. Use all this credit to go ahead and buy the education I need, pay for the subscriptions. I could use it to pay my rent in the meantime as well, after I was done spending the 3 months of savings that I had. Now, of course, this is an absolutely terrible idea. I do not advise anybody to do this, and the repercussions of this, even though I've paid off a lot of it, are still impacting me to this day. So, I do not advise anybody to do this whatsoever. However, I was in a crunch. I didn't have a choice. Nobody was going to pay these bills for me. Nobody was going to give me my job back. And I had made my decision, so now I had to double down. And the way I thought of it was the first year that I worked, I only saved $12,000. So to get access to the equivalent of the money I just got access to would take me around 8 years. Now, I didn't have the time to sit there for fucking 8 years and try to get that figured out. But what I did have was the credit to leverage the situation, buy myself time so I could focus on trading 24/7, so I could focus on funding the trading without hesitation, and so I could buy the education and the guidance that I needed to go ahead and pay it all off in the back end. And this is also the concept of valuing time more than you value money. See, I was okay spending an extra maybe 8 years on the back end fixing the credit once I had a repeatable skill, once I was making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, and once I was in a good position. However, I wasn't down for the fact of spending 8 years building up enough cash just to take the same risk, just for it to take just as long to go ahead and pay off. So in a way it worked. But like I said, not something I condone. And if you're working with someone who knows what they're doing, you will never have to do something that risky. But this is my story, and I took a lot of stupid turns, I took a lot of stupid risks that nobody else would take, and that's exactly why any situation you guys throw at me, I always have the answer for. No matter how bad you fucked up, it's never going to be as bad as me. That was my situation, and very quickly, I had to find a strategy that actually works. The first strategy that I bought a course of was a support and resistance course, and that was basically the first strategy I went to market with. I would wait for the 30-minute to form a support or resistance, and as soon as I saw that, I'd take a trade. And of course, for my mentor who was using it at the time, the strategy worked. But for me, I just couldn't understand why. Every time I took a loss, I couldn't explain why. And it was always some far off answer like, oh, it was just because the psychology was bad, or oh, when it forms this specific way, it has an 80% chance versus a 70% chance. And it was just a whole bunch of stuff that was super subjective. He was able to see it. Nobody else was able to see it, and he didn't really even go into specifics of why it would work, why it wouldn't, and how to use the other time frames to even make that entry more probabilistic. So very quickly I grew frustrated with that strategy. I gave it a solid 4 or 5 months, and after that I got nowhere far. I was still taking losses. I'd probably wasted another 10 or 20 grand on prop firm challenges, and I was nowhere closer to actually becoming a profitable trader, and the system was not getting more accurate. However, in the same breath, this taught me a lot about intraday market structure. I got some experience reading the chart, I got comfortable executing with bigger lot sizes, and I also learned a good amount about probabilities, risk management, and also basic habits like not chasing trades, not chasing losses, and not full porting your account. So although I didn't have a major breakthrough using this strategy throughout my learning within this course, I did learn a few fundamental foundational things. Now, could I have learned that on YouTube? Probably, but it's always nice to have a structure. So 500 down the drain, I wasn't too bothered about it, but it was time to move strategies. And that's when I found myself back with Rafael Vargas, the wholesaling coach that I was working with. Of course, at the time I had left the wholesaling business, but now I was getting into trading. And in between that time, he had actually launched a new group, and that group was called Real Rise Academy. Now, I was definitely naive at the time, so I did not know the full scope of what an MLM was, or why they existed, or what the actual business model behind it was. However, I did get pulled in to this MLM, some might say an IML style academy type of business model. And yeah, it was kind of stupid because you would pay $250 a month to try to learn how to trade from this dude. And sometimes it would be one dude, sometimes it'd be another dude. They'd do the session at London sometimes, and then it switched to New York. And it was just all over the place. There was no real consistency with following their traders, but the real business model behind it was you recruit people, you bring them in, they pay the $250, and you get a percentage of that $250. And unlike traditional affiliate marketing where it's a fair split, everybody's equal, in an MLM it is tiered. So the earlier you join, the more money you make, the later you join, the more you get fucked. And of course, I had no interest in the marketing part. I was only trying to learn how to trade, so this is basically just a waste for me altogether. However, like with every failure, like with every loss, every time you take a risk and maybe think you get scammed or take a L, it always comes with an equal seed of opportunity, breakthrough, and getting to learn a very valuable lesson. And the lesson that I learned from this was actually that even though their strategy wasn't that consistent, even though the live streams weren't that consistent, what it did teach me was that the type of strategy you use has to fit your personality as a trader, and me specifically as a trader, I do better as a scalper rather than an intraday or a swing trader. And the strategy I was using before, I was waiting for a 30-minute candle closure. So sometimes that included waiting for multiple 30-minute candles to close before I could even take a trade. And these trades would also only be like 1-to-1 RR, 1-to-2 RR when they did play out. However, in the Real Rise group, they taught a strategy that could be executed on the 1 minute, 30-second, even 15-second. Of course, you still use zones from the intraday time frame, but it also taught me you could get in on a lower time frame. You could have a tighter stop loss. You can make more money, more risk to reward in a shorter amount of time than if you're an intraday or a swing trader. And that is when I realized, okay, this may not be the strategy for me, but whatever strategy I use, it has to be able to play out quickly enough for me to be patient. Because if you're waiting for too long, even if you're very patient, when you're waiting for 30-minute candles, there will be times where you grow impatient. When you're just waiting for 15-minute, 1-minute candles, even seconds candles, the same impatience really doesn't affect you. You don't have to exercise as much patience because the trading window is much smaller. So I didn't pass any challenges with this group. I didn't get any payouts with the strategy, but it did teach me that your strategy has to fit your personality. So I sat in the group for a little bit longer, eventually decided to cancel my membership. Then I remember just executing the strategy on my own. I thought, okay, when I execute with the group, sometimes I win, sometimes I don't. When I execute on my own, I actually seem to make a little bit of profit. So I tried the strategy for probably like 2 more months, 3 more months, but at the end of the day, I just realized like, yo, this is not working. I'm not getting any closer to my goal, and I'm not really making any progress here. And at this time as well, I was getting pretty close to blowing through all the money as well as all the credit I took out. And it was very clear to me that this was taking a lot longer, and it was a lot harder of a process than I initially thought it was going to be. So during this time, it got very tough. I was barely making the rent. I almost got evicted quite a few times. I was, using a lot of recreational drugs to focus and just keep my mind right. And it was just, a very dark time. I was isolating myself. I was breaking computer screens. I was just acting very, very reckless, very, very irrational. And it was just not a good situation. What's happening, y'all? So, your boy's in a bit of a predicament right now, man. Long story short, took a leap, took a risk on this trading shit, man, and to be perfectly honest, it is not as easy as I thought, man. Not as easy as I thought it would be. Rent is due. Actually, it was due yesterday, but it's a Sunday, so, banks ain't processing their shit and everything. So, and your boy has exactly nothing. Zero. I'm behind on my payments, man, on my credit cards. I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. And shit, it's a miracle that I even made it through this week to eat, to live, to do anything, man. All glory to God for that. I'm thanking God for every inch He's given me right now because, man, I ain't got nothing. But still here, still breathing. You get me? So we're gonna do our best to figure this out. But right now, it's just not looking too good, man. It's one of those things. And I've been here before. I've been in these type of situations. Betting on this week, man. Hopefully the best version of me could come out. And regardless of what happens, man, I can say that I took my best shot, At the end of the day, that's all you can do. No matter the situation, man, you can't let circumstance, can't let emotion get the best of you. All y'all out there, if you ever see this video, man, in the future, and my situation look a little different, my situation look a little out of reach, maybe you're watching this video from me from the past, and you're in this situation right now. All I gotta say is, put it all on the line and trust yourself. Trust God. And just know, man, the lower the situation get, the more painful it gets, the more dark it gets. It's all the more brighter, all the more better, and all the more high it's gonna be on the other side. So, all I gotta say, man, is wish me luck this week. If y'all don't see me after this video, means things ain't go too well. If y'all watching this in the future, if this ever gets out there, it's just a pretty goddamn transparent moment, Just know that it all worked out. That you could do it too. Love y'all. And it was only getting worse. The more pressure my situation built up, the more emotional I'd act, the more accounts I'd blow, the more emotional stress, the more accounts I'd blow, and so on and so forth. The cycle continued. And I remember one night sitting there. I was just like, You know, God, I've been on this journey for a while. At the start of it, I feel like it was you and you only that was calling me to this. I literally said out loud that this was the business model that I was going to do. If it takes the rest of my life, I'm only sticking with this. I'm tired of jumping around. So I prayed and I was just like, God, this is really ruining my life right now, though. I got into debt. I've been, lying to people about my situation. I've been lying to my family when they ask how I'm doing. I've been lying to my friends when they ask how I'm doing. I've been, trying to assume this role as this money-making trader and all this stuff. But at the same time, I'm just blowing everything. I'm fucking up. I don't have a strategy, and I haven't even passed an account. And I was basically like, if this isn't for me, if this is not in your plan for me, allow me to quit immediately. Like, push me as far away from this thing that's ruining my life as possible. But I said, if this is for me, and if this is still the plan and the path that you have for me, please show me exactly what this is about. And if you do, I will show everybody else. And it's crazy. It's crazy how God's timing works, because it didn't happen immediately. But throughout that week or throughout the rest of that month, I started remembering this name of ICT. And in the group that I was in before, they even told us, not to study ICT, that this was the simplified ICT, because ICT was basically just too advanced. It's like learning rocket science. The videos are like 2 hours long. So at the time, I was like, yeah, fuck that. Why would I do that when I can just learn in 15 minutes? And if I just copy these people, I should win. And it also goes back to show, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So at that point, I was done with the gimmicks. I was done with the quick and easy. I'd realized the reality of the game and the situation that I got myself in, and I was ready to accept the truth. I was ready to learn the right way, no matter what it took. And this is when I finally just out of nowhere decided to look up ICT. I found his YouTube channel, and at the time he was doing his 2022 mentorship. And this is still the mentorship that I point a lot of students to this day, to just get a good foundation of ICT. But at this time, he was actually doing the mentorship in real time, which makes this story even crazier, because I pulled up one video, I started watching it, and I swear to you, it was crazy. It's kind of like sitting in church or sitting in a speech or a motivational speech, and whatever the preacher or the teacher is saying, it just resonates with you on a scarily accurate level. Like, you're like, this man is literally speaking my life right now. Like, he's literally telling exactly everything I've been through, everything I'm going through, and everything I thought that I knew. And it was literally that first 2022 model video that did it for me. I spent the rest of that month going through every single video multiple times with notes, sitting through every single rant, and honestly, it just showed me the truth about the market. So I have the ICT strategy. I'm making good progress. I finally feel the confidence that I was waiting for the whole time. Before this, I would always go to bed wondering, am I going to be able to find a setup tomorrow? Am I going to be able to see it and even know what it looks like? And also going to bed not knowing why the trade went wrong, why I took a loss. All of that was finally clear. If I took a loss, I could go back in the chart and identify exactly why, using all the levels, using all the PD arrays that he was teaching me. And if I took a win, I knew exactly why as well, and I could easily identify my setup every single time. However, keep in mind, I still had not passed a challenge. I still hadn't gotten a payout, so I still had a very long way to go. And this is when I started to realize the truth behind some of these prop firms. And I had to also realize that although prop firms were the vehicle that was going to take me from 0 to 100, I was approaching it completely wrong. And I've told this story before, so if you've already heard it, bear with me. But basically, up until that point, I was always going for the 100K or the 200K account. And keep in mind, I was still on the Forex platform, still trading CFDs, so each of these accounts were literally $500 to $750. Now, there were also 25K accounts. There were also 50K accounts. But never did I once think to go ahead and prove myself on that first before jumping to the 100K, because I was so focused on having 6 figures of capital. I was so focused on having 10 accounts so I could say I had 7 figures of capital. But little did I know, more capital doesn't also automatically equal more profit. more capital after you know what you're doing and proving yourself on smaller capital is actually how you get to more profits. It's kind of like in the weight room. You don't just go in there and put triple 45s on each side and then bench press it. You have to prove yourself on the 25, the 35, the 45, double 45, and so on and so forth. So I had to do the same thing with my capital and build it up incrementally. And this is also a big breakthrough for those of you who are running into this same issue now. If you're continuously buying 5, 10 accounts at a time, going for the biggest numbers all the time, you might benefit in just scaling down, proving yourself on a smaller amount first, building that belief system, and then taking that and scaling that confidence. And that's exactly what I did. And it was less out of choice and more out of necessity, because I was actually down to my last $125 and I didn't really have a choice. So this leads me into another fun story. So it is approaching the halfway point of the month. And basically all the money that I had up until this point is very, very quickly getting to its last end. And I only had a couple $100s to spend on prop firms. Now, of course, I would usually automatically spend $500 and go for the 100K account, but that wasn't even a reality anymore. I had to scale down to the 25K account because it was the only one that I could afford. I couldn't even afford to do the 50K challenge. And in my head, I was thinking, how am I even going to make this work? Can this account even pay me enough? Can this even pay my bills? And what I found through running the numbers is that if I had a decent risk to reward, if I executed the same exact strategy that I'm using, but I just risk a little higher on the 25K account, I could still make enough to pay my bills, to feed myself, and to invest into some bigger accounts. So I thought, what the heck, let's just see what happens. I buy the account. By the end of the month, I had my first eval pass, and I also had my first payout. And of course, the payout wasn't that much. It was $247 total. But what this did do was it broke a huge belief barrier in my mindset. And I can't even begin to explain how much that $247 payout still means to me to this day, because it was the first time I took money out of the market and put it into my actual bank account and could actually use it. Everything up until that point was just a dream, was just a hope, was just me seeing what other people were doing, trying to replicate it for myself. At that point, when I got that payout, it became real. My confidence grew, my belief system grew, and the very next week, I secured a 100K account. And the very next week, I got another payout. I reinvested both those payouts, got a 100K account, got another payout, and got 300K more accounts after that account. And keep in mind, this is after 2.5 years of failing to secure a single 100K account. I took a step back, I scaled down, took 2 steps back, and now took 4, 5, 6 steps forward because I built the belief system. A lot of you guys are trying to build the capital before you build the belief system. And that's backwards, because the belief system, the confidence, the process is what's going to allow this to be repeatable. Anybody can risk a crazy amount, full port the account, get lucky, and get a payout once or maybe even twice. Anybody can make a lot of money one month and then lose it all the next month. The real importance of this game is having something that is repeatable, that you can rely on, and that you can trust for the long term. And that only comes from instilling the correct beliefs, and instilling the correct beliefs only comes from getting small wins and turning those into bigger wins. So a lot of you guys are trying to hit the home run, get the big win right off the bat. I was trying to do the exact same thing for 2 or 3 years. Guys, scale down, get that small win, and then build up to the home run. Now, of course, after that point, I thought I was on top of the world, right? I just secured 400K in capital. I made about 20 grand that week. I had a strategy that was working. I had a mentor that actually knew what they were doing, and everything was on the up and up. I wasn't struggling to pay my rent anymore. I was doing good. I could go where I want. I could eat what I want. But of course, with all things business, all things entrepreneurship, you always have to plan for the unexpected. And what would come next was something that I never could have anticipated. So I'm getting back from Christmas. I'm feeling good. I was able to finally buy Christmas gifts for my family, and I have a bunch of fresh funded accounts. I'm getting payouts life is good. But then I go and check my email account. I check my YouTube feed, and everybody is saying the same thing. And I'm not liking what I'm seeing. Apparently, my Forex funds and FTMO and a bunch of the other prop firms that I just passed accounts with were out of business in the US, shutting down operations effective immediately. Yeah, so all that capital that I built up, all of that work that I done, all of that sacrificing basically meant nothing. I had $0 of funded capital. I had the payouts, the couple $1,000s left of the payouts that I got, and essentially no recourse, no way to get them back, no way to contact anybody, and no way to get my accounts reinstated. Not only that, the only prop firm that was available at the time lowered their contract sizes on CFDs to where basically you can only risk $100 on a 100K account. So I was panicking. I basically did not know what to do. I did not know where to go. I was thinking about starting a live account, but all the options I was looking for were basically out of luck. And this is when I had to switch to futures trading. That brings me to the final piece of this story. So I was now a futures trader. Not by choice, but again, by force. It's kind of funny how change works. Whenever you want to change or think about changing or consider changing, it's like it never happens. But whenever you need to make a change, you get real creative with your approach. So at the time, basically no accounts. I was zeroed out. But I did hear from the grapevine this thing called futures. These things called futures trading. I heard of Top Step, and I heard of Take Profit Trader real briefly. So I was like, okay, well, let me at least look into this. Maybe it's similar, maybe it's not. It says NAS 100 is similar to NQ or NASDAQ. So let's see what this is about. And I learned very quickly that it's not entirely different. It's different platforms. You got to set your orders a little different. It's a little bit interesting with the stop loss being on TradingView versus MT4. But the benefit was everybody gets the same price. There's no more slippage. There's no more weird shit when it comes to spreads. Everybody gets the same price and everybody trades the same market. So I get into futures trading, I start running up accounts again, but very quickly I realize that the risk management is a lot more important on the futures accounts than on the Forex accounts. On the Forex accounts, you can risk like the whole entire bandwidth of the account. You could risk like $5,000 and you could just hit for whatever you want. No trailing drawdown, no limitations, no buffer stages, no minimum payout days. If you hit the target, you could take the payout. On futures trading, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. There's payout limits, payout targets, there's minimum days, there's consistency rules, there's all of this nonsense that was not present in the Forex market. So this next stage in my trading was really having to adjust my already profitable strategy to fit even stricter constraints inside of the futures market. And it's kind of crazy, but a lot of you guys are already profitable outside of the prop firm rules. You just haven't figured out how to form fit that strategy to fit within the rules of a prop firm. So that was basically the process that I had to do, and that pretty much brings us to the rich off ticks model, guys. So obviously I get into the futures trading. I start with Take Profit. I scale into a few more firms. I even start a personal account, and with the 2022 model and the IFEG model alone, I run up a good 6 figures. And I'm doing good. I'm living in a high rise. I'm making some free content on YouTube. I'm also teaching a lot of people how to trade on YouTube for completely free, and my students are getting really good results. I was also live streaming for free. I was going live, taking trades in front of people, and very quickly the channel was starting to grow. But honestly, at the time, I was still being very irresponsible with my money. I was still very much a young, reckless type of kid. So every dollar I was making, I was basically spending. Every month that would go by, I was basically barely making my expenses, and I was making a whole lot of money, but I wasn't keeping absolutely any of it. And I'd go through these huge swings where I'd go on a really good run, make a whole bunch of money, but then I would have a very slow month. I'd basically be pinching pennies, trying to make up for all the money I just spent that last month. And this is where I also realized that how you manage your life and how you manage your finances outside the chart actually directly impacts how you manage your finances on the chart. And it was at this point where I knew I had to get on my budget. I had to make sure I was adjusting my expenses to the ebbs and flows of the market, right? Some months you're doing really good, so you can spend a little more. Some months you're not going to do good at all, so you got to make sure you kept enough in the good month to make up for the bad month. All stuff that I had zero experience with, that I wasn't anticipating for, that I had to learn the hard way. But once I did, it became a very repeatable process. But like all of the arcs in this story, of course, it wasn't just a straight line to the top after that, because I ended up running into a lot of other issues. I had to service a lot of the debt that I had built up across the years. And at the end of that period, I was basically left with nothing. So even though I was profitable, even though I was doing good, even though I was getting a lot of payouts because of the mistakes I made in the past, all of that was now having to, it was time to pay the piper. It was time for the reaper to come back for what you had took from it. So I took care of that. I thought everything was good. I thought I was in the clear, but then something else happened. And I promise this is the last thing, God willing, that will happen or that has happened throughout this story. So basically, I finished clearing up my debts. I finished all of that stuff. I'm still getting payouts. Still trading is going pretty well. But then I crashed my car. Brand new car, bought in cash, crashed it, totaled it, basically gone the same day. At the time, I also didn't have insurance, right? I had switched states, so I had to bring over my policy, and I was taking a little bit too long to do it. I'm not even gonna lie. And of course, the one time where I forget to have the insurance is the time where I just total the fucking car. Not that the insurance would have helped me that much anyways in that scenario, but it would have been nice to actually get something back. But basically that was like 30 grand down the drain. And plus I had to pay the ticket, plus I had to pay for no insurance, plus I had to pay to get my license back, and then plus I had to pay the tow truck, the tow yard, the tow everything just to figure that out. So once again, I found myself in the hole. And once again, I also didn't have money for rent. And once again, I also had to make up an exorbitant amount of money in a very little amount of time. However, this time I was profitable. This time I was funded. So I thought, okay, it's not as bad as a scenario as I've been in. However, I do need to make this work. And keep in mind, I also injured my hand when I crashed the car. So I could barely move this hand at all. And this is my dominant hand. This is the hand that I use to click the mouse. This is the hand I use to draw my levels. All of that stuff. So basically, I was having to trade with my left hand. I crashed my car, I had no money, and I had to come up with around 30 grand in the matter of 2 weeks. And again, anytime I run into a situation like this, I always resort to the same solution that's helped me no matter what. It helped me when I was sleeping on the garage floor at my friend's house. It helped me when I was getting through being the high school dropout of my town, the loser who sofa surfs, when I was just getting drunk and couldn't get off the drugs, when I was broke, when I was getting evicted, when anytime I thought my back was against the wall and there really is no out, there really is no solution, I always go to prayer. And that's exactly what I did. I said, God, I don't want to force this. I know what forcing this could bring. I know that I don't really realistically have enough time to make this money, and I don't want to blow up my accounts. How do I do this? How do I figure this out? How do I come up with something that can make this happen? I don't know if it's through trading. I don't know if it's in another business, but show me the way. And what happened next was crazy. So basically, I had been seeing, and at the time I just thought it was coincidence, but now I know for sure it wasn't. But I was coming across this dude named Powell on social media, and there was also one of my most successful students, Swift, started implementing this model called the top and bottom tick. It's essentially a turtle soup. I had already heard of the entry of a turtle soup, not waiting for a lower time frame confirmation, but I never tested it myself. It just seemed too risky, and I never really knew exactly where it was going to turtle soup from, so I preferred having a lower time frame confirmation. However, one thing did catch my attention, and it was just that the stop loss they were using for the little amount they would risk, the risk to reward would be so big that these dudes were catching $2,000, $5,000 trades off a small $200 stop loss, and they were doing it with limit orders. And so that piqued my interest, and I started diving into my charts, and I realized something crazy. and I realized that I was already really good at picking out intraday levels, PD arrays, higher time frame levels, and I was really good about finding exactly where price was going to reverse or react from throughout the day. However, I also noticed that all of the entries I waited for confirmation on, if I would have just set a limit order there with a 10 or 15 or 20 point stop, instead of waiting for a confirmation, not only would I have a better entry, better size stop loss, better risk to reward, I could also risk less money and make more money in less time because it was a bigger risk to reward. The setup played out in 1 to 2 minutes and you could just set it and forget it. So I started testing. I took a bunch of demo trades, bunch of forward testing, bunch of back testing, and pretty soon I deployed the model and I applied a set and forget approach. I would do my analysis, set the level, and leave the charts. And after 5 days of doing this, guys, it is absolutely crazy, but I had gotten more payouts than I'd ever gotten in my life, passed a whole nother max allocation of fundeds, got paid out from those. I only took 6 trades total throughout the month, and my chart time was less than 5 hours. This is the least amount of time I spent on the charts ever, the least amount of stress I ever had ever, the quickest amount of money I ever made ever, and the most amount of payouts I made in a single month, all off this one adjustment. I was still using the same higher time frame analysis, still using the same intraday analysis. The only thing that changed was I stopped waiting for the lower time frame confirmation and I started using the limit orders. And ever since then, guys, it's just been history. I reactivated the channel. I started teaching this model. I showed it to a bunch of you guys and it's just absolutely insane. I have free bootcamp members. Didn't even buy a single thing off of me, getting 5K payouts, 10K payouts. And my other students who are either in my live streams or my mentorship, some of them are making upwards of 20K a month, and a few of them are already doing over 6 figures every single month. So it's honestly crazy. And the thing is too, with this strategy, it's just so divine because it didn't come from me looking at the chart. It didn't come from me like thinking of this or watching a YouTube video or this or that. It came from a situation where I had to surrender everything to God, where my back was against the wall, and where He actually showed me the direction. He pointed my eyes over there. He showed me what I wasn't seeing, and the end result of it was the model that literally built this entire legacy and this entire legacy that's being built right now and that we're blessing so many people with. So glory to God for that. All praise, all glory always goes to God all the time, guys. Hope you enjoyed this story. I literally just sat here and yapped for like an hour, but I wanted to make sure I included literally all the details and everything that I was going through throughout that period of my life. I know a lot of you guys relate to it. Some of you guys are homeless right now. Some of you guys have messaged me. You're also staying in your friend's garage. Some of you are in massive debt like I was in massive debt. So if this resonated with you, if this can help you guys, just remember what I did at every single stage. Every time I felt like my back was against the wall, every time I thought I was going the wrong way, I simply surrendered everything to God. I tuned into what He wanted for me, and I stopped trying to do things all on my own. Much love, everyone. Genuinely appreciate all the support as well. It has been absolutely insane how much growth we've had in such little time, how much success the students have had in such little time. This is far from the end. If anything, this is just the beginning, and we're just fucking getting started here. So there you have it, guys, the story of how I went from homeless, broke, in debt, devastated, negative $60,000, sleeping on my friend's floor and using a box as a desk, to becoming a 7-figure trader, making upwards of 6 figures a month, living wherever I want, traveling where I want, eating, doing, going wherever I want, and experiencing a life of true freedom. So if you enjoyed this, or if this resonated with you, if you can relate to some of these things in this story, comment down below. I'd love to hear some of your guys' stories. Other than that, I will see y'all in the next video. Until we talk next time, be blessed, stay safe, and I will see you guys in the next video.